Good evening. Joining me tonight, a climate change denier and, naturally, Bill Nye Science Guy.
Did predict that this decade we've just had would be around 0.2 of a degree warmer than the decade of the 90s, and we were right.
Well, first of all, I'm not a believer in global warming.
It seems an open question, not a settled question, to what degree human activity is causing that. Is that not an open question?
It's not an open question. It's a settled question. Human activity is causing climate change.
I don't agree with the notion that some are putting out there, including scientists, that somehow there are actions we can take today that would actually have an impact on what's happening in our climate.
What the is going on? Climate change. We've all heard of it. We've seen the polar bears and the graphs and the articles and the seemingly unavoidable impending doom. How have you seen climate change in your lifetime?
So I was born in Boulder, and I remember as a little kid that it was a lot like it is now, where some Christmases would be no snow at all and you could be playing outside and all of that.
First came to Boulder in 1973. I mean, there are always warm days like this in the wintertime, but there was more snow earlier, whereas now it seems like in winter the snow comes more in the springtime than the wintertime. You get heavier snows in the spring.
We used to have a heavy snowfall mid-October, so Halloween was always, your costume was under galoshes and a parka. Winter was pretty much November through March, and now it's, well, this year looks like it's going to be January through April, right?
It used to be the first 2 weeks of June it would rain almost every day, and that was just a pattern I always remembered from school getting out, and then it would rain for 2 weeks and then summer would start. Along about 1984-5, that stopped happening. My husband, who did not know about that, I was like, oh watch, it's going to happen, it's going to rain every day, and then it didn't.
The summer has changed as well in the weather, and then when July came along, or at least by mid-July through August, you get a heck of a lot of rain. It's kind of like the monsoon season, and that was cyclical, rhythmical, and that's really been disruptive.
Probably the most notable thing was being a little kid and going to Cranmer Park and being able to see the mountains from Pikes Peak all the way up past Longs Peak, and then by the time I was in high school, it would be a clear and rare day when you could even just see the mountains, let alone Pikes Peak. You know, I think one of the more interesting things, I think growing up, I don't really remember many 90-degree days. There might be 2 or 3 90-degree days. But by, now, we have 90 degrees all over the place. We have 80-degree days in November.
You can't ignore, or you can't not see how it's changing other people's lives, whole countries, especially people that are live at a low elevation close to sea level.
What would you say climate change as a whole means to you personally?
I'm glad I'll be dead in about 15 years.
I mean, it's changed directly my life because I'm teaching this 3 classes now, and in 8th grade right now we're studying solely climate change. I've learned a lot, and I feel pretty passionate about the importance of youth being educated, and I feel like it's really critical as a curriculum, because I think we're doing a disservice to you guys if we don't educate you about what's going on, because it's going to affect you. It is already. It's science.
I worry for my children and grandchildren, and you guys. That's why one has to pay attention to whom one votes for.
Do you remember the time when it was recognized and considered a true issue?
I don't know what year it would have been, but it's about 20 years ago. First you heard of it, but maybe everybody hadn't heard of it. It's much more prevalent now.
And what issue do you think really woke people up to the fact?
I don't know what issue woke various areas up to the fact. I think in western United States, it's the wildfires.
I vaguely remember, maybe it was Bush, where people, before Obama, where people were saying, hey, climate may be warming up. And then Obama started kicking into gear, and then Trump squashed it all. and now it's probably too late. But yeah, I'd say it was probably around Bush.
And you really believe it's too late?
Knowing how governments work and how effectively they work together, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
But what does climate change mean? What does climate change mean to a high school student in Boulder, Colorado, a landlocked state far from any rising sea levels?
Do you feel endangered or threatened by climate change?
Well, I mean, I think everybody probably should. Personally, I don't feel like I can do anything about it, but I do feel endangered by it.
Absolutely, I do. I mean, honestly, probably not a day goes by where I don't think about it in some way. Even if, like, there's just a bit too much snow or it's just a little bit too hot in December, I'm like, this is happening and it's only gonna get worse.
Not necessarily, because before the world completely gets destroyed by this, I'll be dead probably, so I don't feel that bad about it.
Personally, no, not really. I think climate change affects everybody. In my lifetime, in our lifetime, I think, we'll see a lot of change, but as for death, I don't think it's that dramatic. I think it's more of a slow, kind of looming threat.
The inevitability of it, with how corrupt our world is and with how hard it is to make even like the simplest change. Making such a big change in our society just seems impossible.
I fear that, selfishly, me, my family, my friends won't really have a future. Well, I guess humanity won't have a future, but that's probably the main fear I have, because I mean, I have climate anxiety, I guess, because I have so many dreams and aspirations that I want to, I want to happen in the future, and obviously that won't happen if I'm dead. Sorry, that was super morbid.
Well, I don't like change, so probably, like, if all the snow melted in the world and snow just didn't happen anymore, like, that would be changing, and I don't like anything changing, and I would miss the snow, and yeah, that's just stuff I don't like.
I think I don't have many fears about climate change. I think my biggest fear is that humanity won't be willing to change. The Earth's not going to die, life's not going to go away. It's going to be humanity, if anybody. So that kind of comforts me, that, we're going to destroy ourselves, if anything.
Do you feel pressured to do something about climate change?
I think everybody feels some sort of pressure. You have to do it. It's a survival instinct.
No, but also I feel like if I didn't, I would feel a little bit bad, because I guess we all have to do something about it. It's basically everyone's job to at least do some little thing, even if it's just recycling or buying that one glass product instead of a plastic product.
Actually, in the lower grades, I did feel more pressured because, like, teachers and even students would talk about it way more, and we would, like, listen to podcasts about it and stuff like that, but nowadays, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, we're a race, so that's obviously survival instinct. We want to keep going. I try to do whatever I can. Climate change is not all my problem. It's more we all have to change.
Does climate change contribute to any anxiety or depression?
Well, it definitely contributes to anxiety. Sometimes I have these crises about it, and I'm like, oh my god, we're all gonna die. And I suffer from anxiety disorder, so sometimes I just kind of spiral into this dark climate change rabbit hole, and then I can feel a little down about it. I wouldn't say I feel depressed about it, but I can say it definitely has its negative effects.
No, I think, climate change, I definitely think about it a lot. I think, what can we do? But I don't really have any fear of it. It's more this threat that I think we have to solve.
Are you currently involved in anything to help the climate?
We just bought an electric car, and we're getting rid of our gas guzzler Range Rover, so that's good. I'm not really in any movements or anything. I mean, every summer we do a community garden, and we compost every summer, only in the summer. And of course we recycle and refrain from buying a lot of plastic products, but I guess that's really only all I'm doing.
Currently, I do live off of my own locally sourced food, and I do grow my own food and stuff like that. I don't do much for climate change, but I'm really just a kid, and I hope I can do more in my future.
I mean, not really, but whenever I have an opportunity, I try to not, throw trash and, buy some more, not plastic, all that stuff. So I do a little bit, but it's not that much. I could be doing a lot more.
I don't think I'm in like some people like seriously support organizations and stuff like that, but I recycle. That's it.
And what's something you think everyone can do to try and help climate change?
I think just being more aware and open to the fact that we will have to change at some point, and the longer we have to go without doing change, the harder that change is going to be. So I think just, if people could become more aware of, the threats of climate change, that would definitely help.
Well, I feel very strongly that when I see those pictures of lots of trash in the ocean affecting just the world and our climate and everything, that's what I don't like. Just mainly recycle people and stop using so much plastic.
The future of our Earth is being placed on our shoulders, and we're just supposed to cope? Our anger is apparently unwarranted and our fear unreasonable. What are we supposed to do?
What we know about Colorado and climate change is a lot of what we're already seeing. It's going to get a lot windier, really big wind gusts on the Front Range. We have a lot more variability in our seasons because it's getting a lot warmer. So Colorado has one of the bigger temperature increases in the United States because it's higher up. And so the effects of climate change are a little bit more extreme because of the altitude. That means we're going to have hotter and hotter summers and warmer winters, a lot more variability and a lot more wind. We're already seeing that with the dryness, right? And so I think one time people think about wind, that doesn't sound like such a big deal. It's always windy, but maybe the fires are a good example of when it's really windy and you don't have snow, the soil dries out and then the grasses dry out, and that makes it possible to have a wildfire in the middle of winter. It's always good to think about when you read, well, what's this area predicted to experience from climate change? Okay, it's supposed to get hotter and it's supposed to get windier. Well, what does that mean for the landscape, right? That means that you're going to have less water for farming. That water is going to be available at different times of year, and that's going to be harder for farmers. It also means that it's going to be drier, which means there's going to be a greater risk for fire. And then we all know about the pine beetles, right? So vectors for disease really can live better in warmer climates. So then there's the vector issue. So while we know that warmth, heat, and wind are going to be the main things, it's good to think about what those things then mean on the landscape.
What is something that is over-discussed about climate change?
Everybody over-discusses carbon offsets. Carbon offsets are this concept of a company who pollutes can offset that pollution by buying a credit, and that credit goes towards somebody sequestering carbon so that it sort of balances out. But in reality, very few of these things actually take place. We hear so much about companies wanting to do it or markets trying to happen, and in reality, it doesn't actually happen that much. So I think in a climate world, the offset topic is really over-discussed. I think what's under-discussed is how the world actually works. So because I'm a policy wonk, and so I love to talk about climate policy. Climate policy is based off of the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol was one of the first times when different nations agreed to do something about climate change. It was actually architected by Al Gore's team back in the 90s in Kyoto, Japan. Now, the US didn't end up ratifying it, but we were primary architects of that policy. And that policy was based off of something called the Montreal Protocol, which went after things like aerosols or ozone depleting substances to deal with the ozone hole, and the acid rain program. So this is a wonky way of saying that the way that policy was crafted was to combat point source pollutants, so smokestacks or aerosol cans. And the way the world actually works is that carbon is the driver of life in our system. It's the building block of life. And where you get more carbon, you get more water. And where you get more carbon and water, you get more natural fertility. And where there's more natural fertility, you have more biodiversity. So we don't talk a lot about how the cycles of the earth work and how the elements all work together in climate change. We tend to really talk about what we're confined to talk about, which is point source pollution reduction, because of that framework we have with the policy. And I think that's where we could really evolve the conversation into like how something works, not just stopping what's bad, right? Because that policy framework sets us up just to say like coal plants are bad. It doesn't set us up to say, this is how the soil works, this is how plants work, this is how the ocean works, and to support those systems in working better. So I hope we talk more about that in the future.
And what is something that everyone can do, especially for high school students?
I think what you can all do is learn about it, because you're going to be in a system that's going to be increasingly destabilized. We all are. And also, the thing that's important to know, and I think the more you learn about it, is just how amazing nature is. So when we get hurt, our body heals. And the earth is the same way. The earth body can heal when we are good participants in these cycles of carbon and nutrients and water. And so what I would say is teach yourself about them. I think the most important thing you can do is learn about how the earth works, so you can understand how in your life and in the policy and in the lives of those around you, we can be positive participants, because we don't have to just be bad. People are often like, people are bad for the planet. I don't think that's true. The planet actually really needs us to work really well and needs us to be positive participants. So I would say the most important thing to do is learn about something you love in nature. Just learn about how it works. Be curious and understand it, and then support it happening. And that gives life back to life. So that's what I'd say. And composting. You should always compost.